My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and I'm here today to help you build your cloud computing career. Maybe your goal is to be a cloud architect. Maybe your goal is to be a cloud security architect. Maybe your goal is to be an enterprise architect or an artificial intelligence architect or any type of architecture career. I want to help you get there. See, there was a point when I started my career 25 years ago, and I was trying to transition from internal medicine to networking. And I went and got a whole bunch of certifications. I did all the things that I thought I should do. In the end, no one cared. And then I got some really good, some strategic guidance. And it was like the secret key that unlocked the door, where a few months later, I had my first job as a senior network engineer. 3 months later, I was a lead architect at the world's largest internet service provider. And then 2 years later, I was a principal solutions architect, working my way up through the architecture ranks. And the point is, you can do this too, as long as you know what you need to know and know how to get to your goals. So that's why I'm here, basically, so you can bring me any questions you may have about your career, maybe how to become a cloud architect versus how to become a cloud engineer, or what does a solutions architect do, or what is an enterprise architect, or whatever it is. I want you to have the career of your dreams. So I come here 2 hours each week, 1 to 2 hours, depending upon how long the questions last and how much time I have to try to come online and just do what I can to guide you, to give you that kind of cloud computing career guidance. So let us know the questions you have so that I may be able to help you. What I also wanted to tell you that is we have a couple of things that I thought would be interesting to talk to you about. So one thing that I wanted to let you know is we have a 60% off sale of every architectural training program that we offer. And if that's of interest to you, take advantage of the 60% off. I also wanted to tell you that on Thursday this week, we're going to run a webinar on how to become an architect, like a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, security architect, and we'll address the architecture career of your desire on that webinar. It'll be at 1 p.m. Eastern. It'll be live on Zoom. It'll be free on Zoom. And we can talk all about the architect roles, whether it be a cloud architect versus security architect versus enterprise architect. We'll talk about all the skills you need. And we'll talk about everything you need to do to get hired when it's your first architect job, how to bypass HR, the kind of things you need to learn. And it's all free. And you can ask me questions because it's live and free on Zoom. So please sign up if that's of interest to you. I also wanted to tell you that in the description of this video, there are many free resources to help you in your career. Resources on how to win the cloud architect interview, for example. We have resources on how to become a solutions architect or a cloud architect or an AI architect, and it is all free. So bring me your questions and I will do anything that I can to assist you. It wasn't that long ago for me. I mean, it was and it wasn't. And I remember being in that position where I was transitioning careers. And what I was doing was I wasn't imagining the skills that I needed to learn for my future job. And I built it based upon what other people told me they thought that I needed to learn for that job. The problem was there were like internet billboards in those days, and we were all checking it out, and the people that were on there didn't know because they weren't working either and they were struggling. So that's why I'm here to try and see if you have any types of questions that you could that I could possibly do to help you, because that made all the difference in the world. So I'll give you some time. I understand some people are shy, and you don't have to be shy. Hi, Mike. Would like to talk about our generative AI architect program and the trajectory of AI as you see it. Great question, Taw 3000. So I'll tell you first. I'll tell you what I see a little bit about our generative AI program because you asked for it, and then I'll tell you about what I see going on with AI. And I've had lots of experience with AI. I mean, not like David Lithicum, but my experience has started with AI since 2001. So it's something I do have a good degree of familiarity. So our generative AI architect program is a complete program to teach you how to become a generative AI architect. It has 3 live classes per week, 2 with David Lithicum. And in these live classes, you really learn generative AI architecture. It's got a course with me where we go over all the executive skills that you would need in the program. Our programs are until you are hired programs. So once you sign up, you stay in the program until you're hired, although it typically takes people about 8 to 12 months, generally speaking, through the program. In between the live classes, which will be on Zoom 3 days per week, and it'll be on Zoom so you can ask questions, you will also have the opportunity there will be a tremendous amount of work for you to do, lessons for you to learn, architectures for you to turn in and submit and get feedback on, presentations that you'll learn. And we'll cover every skill that you need to learn, whether it be the business acumen, the leadership, the sales skills, the executive presence, the emotional intelligence, the business acumen, for example, the executive communication skills, the leadership skills. We teach all of that, but we will also teach all of the underlying technology, meaning the elements that make up the network in the data center and the cloud, because you'll have to know how to do these things in a data center and on the cloud. So it'll include all of that, but it'll also include how all the components of generative AI and how to design them. And then what you'll do, Taw 3000, is you'll have an internship in this program where you'll be given projects. You'll have to do the exact work of the architect: design, present, and sell, respond to RFPs, create your architectural artifacts, present your architectures, and you'll do that until you're hired. So that's our generative AI architect program. And it's taught by David Lithicum primarily because David Lithicum has been working with AI since 1985. My experience is only 2001. I can't compare that to David Lithicum's since 1985. So David Lithicum teaches that. So let's talk. So there's that. Now, what do I think about the trajectory of AI? I think you're going to see 2 things. To me, I've been involved in building the internet boom. I've been involved in every little technology thing. And here's typically what happens. First, I'm not sure. Then everybody says, I need this. And what they do is they spend an enormous amount of money. And everybody that knows nothing about AI, any person that's ever written a single line of code, every network engineer, security engineer, cloud engineer in the entire world, DevOps engineer, all of a sudden pretends to be an expert in whatever. And then they all start companies on products that are absolutely ridiculous. And then what will ultimately happen is 2/3 or 3/4 of all the AI stuff fails. And the stuff that stays becomes really, really strong. So, for example, in the early days of the internet, there were 1 million little internet service providers that were popping up. There were 1 billion little routing and switching companies that were popping up trying to compete for the space. And in the end, the internet building became predominantly Cisco and it predominantly became Juniper. And there's a few other players that became out there, but they were the two big ones that really thrived out of it. And the same thing, whether it was, any type of the first e-commerce companies, there were a whole lot of them. They were instantly worth a whole lot of money, and then they would fall apart, and then some survived, like Amazon. And look what happened to them, and look how they blossomed over time. So, and Netflix was another one of those new internet companies. So what you'll see is you'll find the companies that are leveraging technology, that are real strategic at it, that are not only so strategic at it that they've got the resources to apply, and they've got the right enterprise and AI architects to learn the goal, the organization, the people, the processes, and how to optimize it, and then how to throw AI to solve business problems, the strategist. These are good jobs. And there's going to be many of them, and many of them. So AI is going to be there. We're going to be using AI in healthcare at some point. Some of the laws will have to change for that to occur, but we'll use it. And tech companies are quite fond of paying lobbyists to be able to change laws, just like drug companies are. So, we'll see it in healthcare. It'll probably help us with radiology type images as decision support. It may help us with prescribing decision support. It may also be able to look out there and aggregate a patient's information and try to come up with diagnoses, for example. So as opposed to just general algorithms. So it may help us with those kinds of things. Might be able to take me, for example, who, even though my background is internal medicine, I spent so much time in cardiology and other areas that I didn't have a chance to spend too much time with dermatology. And it might help me identify a rash, for example. Whereas AI, when we're dealing with airplanes, at some point could be flying the planes, could be landing the planes. It could be calculating where to get the cheapest fuel and how to buy options on fuel. And these things are already done. Calculating more effective routes, calculating collision avoidance. So there's a lot more that's going to be coming out of it. So we're also going to see AI being integrated in robotics, and have, literally speaking, AI agents attached to robots that can literally, and I see it, we're not too far away, build houses and do other things, build cars, So I think AI is big. I think AI is everywhere. And even though AI is 40 years old, the GPU capabilities and the TPU capabilities and all these, even some of the CPUs out there, the way they can run AI and certain FPGAs and ASICs, the speed now made it possible to do things that we really couldn't do so easily and inexpensively in the past. So I see it everywhere. And it's going to be, to my mind, a big percentage of everything. And when you speak to CEOs, they're heavily investing, and for good reason. They see optimization. They see augmenting the current staff they have. They see needing less staff to do everything. So less people, and the people you have delivering much higher value and much more productivity is there. So I think people have to understand that, though. And if you find yourself in a career like AI architecture, you're great. If you find yourself in a career of strategy with technology, again, you're really great. If you find yourself in a position where you're a designer, you're the top decision maker, you're leading large teams, you're all really great in AI. It's because that can't affect any of us. But, if the AI, like Google, does 50% of the coding at Google, or 25% of the coding at Google, 3 years from now, AI will probably do 50% of the coding at Google. And 10 years from now, maybe AI does all the coding. So then we need a very small number of people that do coding in the future. And those people will be the best of the best of the best of the best of the best and earn huge salaries. But a lot of the average people won't be as good as AI. So we have to see how AI impacts us. Certain things, like medicine, you need to go to school, you need to have a license, there's huge lobbies. Medicine's kind of safe. Any kind of sales is always safe. Any kind of leadership roles are always safe. Any kind of architecture where you're dealing with people and stakeholders and leaders and managing vendors and managing stakeholders and leading teams and facilitating meetings, all that kind of stuff. Again, that can't be replaced by AI. So that's kind of the way I look at things, and I look at the way the pieces are tied together, and I look at the way companies have asked me to either automate, optimize costs via outsourcing or AI, or other ways to enhance productivity. These are great questions. I'm glad you asked it, Todd 3000. Flying kites. Hi, Mike. You've seen me talk about it before, but can I talk about the importance of competency versus certifications? Absolutely. So, in order to hire someone, They have to be able to do the job. So imagine I need an airplane pilot because I want to fly an airplane, right? Which do I care about? The person's pilot license or whether the person can fly that plane and the 500 people that are on that plane? And the pilot's a bad example because I can't let somebody without a license fly that plane. But at the end of the day, if you are on an airplane, which pilot do you want? The one that knows how to fly the plane or the one that's got a bunch of paper certifications but can't do anything? Now, which doctor do you want? The person that went to the most prestigious schools in the world where 2/3 of their patients died due to medical malpractice, or the person that went to medical school overseas, did a residency in the US, but they're in the top 1% of physicians in the entire world? So that's what I go to. And I let the person with the prestigious degrees that kills people, I keep them away from my family because they're more of an assassin than a physician. So it all matters in how good you are and the ability to do the job. I've been a hiring manager forever. I never look at someone's certifications and see if they can do it. Now, I do look at their certifications and say, the person has a CCIE, they have a CISSP. They're probably pretty smart to do both of them. Maybe it's worth an interview. And yes, the certifications will give someone an interview. I see someone with an AWS Solutions Architect Professional and a TOGAF 10 and a CISSP. I say, this person put some time and effort into learning. Maybe they know something. Let me bring them in on an interview. So the certifications help me with that. But at the end of the day, if I'm hiring a surgeon, I don't care about any of the cool little things and places that surgeon went and did extra study. I care about how good that surgeon is. Now, flying kites, I'm getting spinal surgery next week. And I'm flying to Beverly Hills to get it. Because even though that I live in Palm Beach, Florida, I couldn't find a surgeon with the sophistication to actually do it. So here I am willing to try 3,000 miles and actually pay cash for a procedure because insurance doesn't cover it, because I want the best of the best of the best. Now, I did not look, don't care where this person went to medical school. I care that hundreds of other physicians all got their surgery done there, and I'll talk about the experience they actually had. So that's kind of what I'm actually really talking about, is competency. So we can look at certifications and say, will they create competency? I've got someone that's got an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, and let's say they've got a Security Plus, and let's say they've got and then they say they've got a Red Hat Certified Engineer. Good certifications. I'm telling you, these are good. So the problem is the Security Plus, generally speaking, is not going to be enough for my minimum level of knowledge required for security. So I typically write that one off. Even if it's a good certification, it just doesn't carry the weight. And I say, okay, the Security Plus is a little bit light. The AWS is the Solutions Architect Professional is the name of a service and how to configure that service. Okay, so the person knows the AWS names. Now, flying kites, when I ask that person, how would you deal with an environment where you've got an application that needs to be distributed across 3 clouds? Additionally, it needs incredibly low latency and extraordinary security. What types of things would you think about? How would you load share that across the clouds? How would you plan to synchronize your data across the clouds? Would you stick this in a demilitarized zone? Would you stick it in additional VPCs? Explain your rationale to me. And they can't answer that question. It doesn't matter that they've got a certification that teaches them how to click boxes on the AWS Management Console. And let's say I've got someone with an AWS Security Advanced, and I say, what would a demilitarized zone look like for a mission critical web app? And then they say AWS WAF and Shield. And I say, no. Now, if that person knows how to tell me that they should use a content delivery network to protect against some DDoS, for example, and then they should use a load balancer to front end 2 next generation firewalls, and maybe they use another load balancer to front end 2 next generation firewalls, and then off of those firewalls, I create a subnet, and on that, I've got the public end of a load balancer, and that load balancer we're going to lock down with, say, a security group. And then on those web servers themselves, then we might also put a WAF but not an AWS type cloud WAF, but a WAF that's actually adaptive with behavioral signatures, something like we could get from Palo Alto that we could stick on all clouds. And on those servers, we would disable unnecessary services to harden those servers. And on those servers, we put things like host-based firewalls, host-based IDS, IPS systems into these systems. And we'd close down additional ports. Now we'd have all these logs go to a SIEM and a source system that'll use AI to correlate the logs. For example, and I see somebody talk about that and they know what they're doing, then I can hire them. But I can't hire them because they can click a couple of boxes. So the ability to do the job is what I hire for. Getting certified, it's not going to get you there. Now, there are some certifications that prove competency. I can tell you by the time someone has finished a Cisco certified internet expert, they know how to do the job of a network engineer 95% of the time. Now, why is that? Because the Cisco certified internet expert, and I passed mine, you can see my number 7417. I read 75,000 pages of materials to pass that exam. I had to do 1,000 hours of labs to pass that exam. I spent more than a car cost in training to pass that exam. And by the time I was done that exam, I knew just enough to be competent in my job. And that's when I actually started learning. So the key to remember is a certification is beautiful. A certification will build your brand, but we have to see if the certification is valid. Now, the same way flying kites, I told you that the AWS Solutions Architect Professional doesn't hold a lot of value other than an interview for an architect. What if I had a cloud engineer by comparison? It would mean a lot more. And the cloud engineer certification, and why? Because the cloud engineers are going to configure things. Whereas the cloud architects are going to design a solution, present a solution, meet with stakeholders, manage a proof of concept, create architectural repositories, lead architectural review boards, all the things that are not hands-on. So I hope that helps flying kites, and please feel free to ask more. How is Florida? It is absolutely beautiful. It's been nice. It's been sunny. Does the industry currently have a generative AI architect role? Absolutely. There's a lot of demand for generative AI architects. In fact, the demand was so high, that's why David Lithicum and I decided to create a program for it. Easy to get a job, enormous demand, incredibly high salary because everybody wants it and nobody knows how to do it. So currently huge demand. In fact, you can think of any specialty that exists at Darius and it will have a solution. So networking will have network architects. Security will have security architects. For example, and we will have AI architects. We may have agentic AI architects who specialize in agentic AI and generative AI architects who specialize in generative AI, or we may have AI architects that are going to cover this as well as other AI applications too, and deep learning and machine learning applications. So, I want you to think about that, Darius, that all those pieces are going to go there together. So we'll have security architects, we'll have architects for identity and access management. In fact, on Thursday night, the person that's teaching in our security architect program is my friend Isaac. And Isaac is an identity and access management architect who consults to big global banks. And that way, I teach security and he teaches IAM because they're different architects actually, and that actually have a different focus. We will even but yeah, there's also engineering specialties as well that will consult in our architecture team, but lots and lots of architects. In fact, you know what, Darius? Maybe this will help. Maybe this will help everyone that's here. Let me kind of, I put together a slide with Alonzo's help to make it look better than it ever would, but maybe this will kind of help you understand the architecture puzzle pieces. So let me just scoot over. Bear with me 1 second and I'll make this look a little prettier. Okay, so what you can see over here is we've got all these architect roles. And at the top, the chief architect, effectively, the main architect is going to be the chief information officer. That person does architectural as well as management responsibilities, meaning the CIO is responsible for the strategy, the technology strategy, but also running the IT division. So all the production systems and managing those teams too. So because the CIO's role is the tie between strategic things and operations and strategy, they will usually have an enterprise architect or a chief technology officer or a chief architect or a VP of IT, which basically is performing enterprise architect functions. Now, these enterprise architect functions are focused on people, processes, and technology, because enterprise, if we just change the technology, we've done nothing for the business. But if we've got a sales rep, for example, and the sales rep is slow because they don't have the right information, if we can create a strategy to get the sales rep better information, they can sell more, for example, or get the doctors better information in a hospital and nurses better information quicker, they can provide better care. So at the enterprise architect and the cloud architect level, we have to think about the people, the way the organization does things, and all the technologies that's going to support it. Now, with that, so I'm a cloud architect. I'm more of an enterprise architect, but I do some cloud architecture work too. Now I design my strategy. My strategy is what most enterprises are. I've got a data center and 2 to 3 other clouds. Now, because I've got a data center and 2 to 3 other clouds, and I want you to understand what a cloud architect or enterprise architect is really dealing with. 5,000 remote locations, 100,000 IP addresses, 10,000 routes in the routing table, 50 to 100 different applications, 10 different security vendors, 5 different networking vendors. So this is reality. So when we're at this cloud architect and security architect and enterprise architect level, we're now more of a coordinator. So I'm going to have AWS solutions architects from AWS come to me and say, here's our recommendations. I'll have Microsoft solutions architects and Google solutions architects that are going to be coming to me trying to make recommendations, so I buy and use their stuff. At the same point on my team, I'm going to have a network architect who focuses on networking, a security architect who focuses on security, an artificial intelligence architect focused on artificial intelligence, an IAM architect, applications architect, a whole lot of them. Now, when it comes to my security architects, they're going to have to make architectural decisions. Do I use the Checkpoint firewall, or do I use the Cisco firewall, or do I use the Palo Alto firewall? So the security architect will then bring in solutions architects from the vendors, and solutions architects are pre-sales, design, present, and sell. So here, for example, we've got a Palo Alto solutions architect advising my solutions architect, who then is going to advise me. And then I've got a solutions architect from Checkpoint Software, for example, that's going to be trying to sell their solution along with the account rep to the solutions architect to convince me to get it. And then once it gets to me and an enterprise level, we've got to convince the CIO to spend money. So that's why solutions architects are typically at the pre-sales level to advise the client's architects to do these things. So I kind of hope that helps. I think that will probably explain the various type of roles and what we do. Chris, let's bring in the next question. If you've got questions about your career, please bring them in. I want to do anything I can to help you build your best cloud architect career, enterprise architect career, security architect career. I've trained thousands over the years, and I want to help you too. Hey, Darius, is the CCIE certification a worthy goal? So let's evaluate it at the time. At the time I did the CCIE, Darius, it was well worth it. You look at my number, which is on this side of the room, it's 7417. It's back in the days when the CCIE was a 2-day exam. No one was ever passing that thing. And the shortage of network engineers to build out the internet was so big that network engineers with CCIEs in the year 2000 were earning about $100 an hour and getting easily 60 to 80 hour a week. So they're earning $6,000 to $8,000 a week in 2000. Put that in today's money, multiply it by, say, 2 for inflation. And now you're dealing with, say, 12,000 to 12,000 to 16,000 a week, which if you figure, let's say 13,000 a week, it would be 42,000 a month, which is $500,000 a year. And that was then. So when I did the CCIE, yeah, it was worth it. Now, the CCIE is worth it in a lot of ways, and it's not worth it in a lot of ways. It is the best certification in my mind in the entire world. If you have the CCIE, you will always have a job. If you lose a job, a week later, you'll have another one because everybody's going to want to talk to you. So as far as job insurance, the CCIE is there. As far as giving you good, strong principles for a network engineering, and I said engineering career, yeah, the CCIE is good. Is it a curriculum to develop extraordinary technical depth? Yes. So for all that's good. But let's say the average CCIE network engineer right now is earning $120,000 a year. And I'm going to tell you, to do that CCIE, it's going to cost you $20,000 minimum and a good year or 2 years of your life. So is it worth it? Well, let's now take another thing. So let's say we have a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, and we give that enterprise architect extreme business acumen. And by that, either we put them in something like our tech leadership program or our executive architect program, or we send them for an MBA. Now that cloud architect understands business, and they understand the factors and the inputs and the outputs of businesses and business architecture and business process re-engineering. Now, I might have an architect that comes in with $150,000 salary, and now we give this, and 2 years later, they're at a $350,000 salary. So we're going to get a much greater return on our investment with business acumen skills. If you just Google and go to salary.com, average salary with people with strong business acumen skills, you'll get an answer of over $700,000 a year. So that kind of puts us in this position of where do we spend our time? Because we can only spend our time or effort in one place. So because we can only spend that time and effort in only one place, I personally try to spend it to the highest value target. And if I kind of show you this, and I think this will probably help, bear with me. I think it'll show you. I like to use this to show why I'm so focused on developing business acumen in my architects, because admittedly, I'm obsessed with it compared to others. And it's because of what it did for me. See, what I learned here was the business acumen, the leadership skills, the executive skills. Look at the impact. So I have a principal architect for the most part. And that at that point, when you're a principal architect, you're having high-level business discussions. You're going into your, what do you call it? You're going back to your client and saying, we need to create these new features because the clients are demanding these features. You're providing guidance to major businesses and global businesses and other architects. You're providing training curriculum for other architects, and you've got some business skills. Now, the range of these salaries, the one at Amazon is about 300 to 500. Azure's about the same, 300 to 500. Google comes in a little higher with an average of about 500,000, but the pay range of 394 to 677. But we also look at the senior director at Cisco, the senior director at Palo Alto, and a director at NVIDIA. Now look what we're seeing. We're seeing all of these are $500,000 a year, all of them, or more. So the more you focus on getting these skills, and you marry them with these skills, which is what I like to do in my architecture career, by far the higher your salary is going to be. So if I had to choose time-wise, do I dump $20,000 to $30,000 in a CCIE, or do I dump $30,000 into executive education or train with us for basically 1 or 2 days pay for the average architect? But if I did that, that's where I'd say the juice may not be worth the squeeze. It may not be the best return on investment. Now, Darius, if you said my goal is to be a network engineer, I'd say go do the CCIE. So it all depends upon your goals, and certifications either build towards your goals or they take you further away. And the worst part of it, Darius, is going to be this. Once you reach bigger architecture roles, and I'm happy I can keep this CCIE thing on my plaque on my wall behind me because I love it and I love the CCIE. But I reached a point at Cisco where one of the Cisco executives asked me to take the CCIE off my business card, and my CISSP for that matter, because he wanted me to see more as an executive and a strategist than a techie. So I kind of hope that helps. And I think I dare us answer this. There's already many generative AIs. Oh, do I see a generative AI security role coming to the market? So here's the thing. Security generally covers everything. And generative AI is something that's focused on something. Now, do I see a generative AI security practices that are going on in every single company that has specific security to their generative AI, as well as other forms of corporate security? Absolutely. Now, the question is, will that become a specialized role? I'm sure it will be, but that one's going to take a good couple of years. But being early to something like that would not be a bad idea. So I do see some cross and interlapping between those two. More than I would have seen if you would have asked me this, the more I think about it. Because if we have like a model, like an LLM model poisoning, for example, and if we poison a model and the model has bad data, the model will spit out dangerous things. So we could have generative AI filling in information that's not. So there's a lot of security concerns. So yes, I do see it coming to the market. Probably not in the next 2 to 3 years, but I do see it coming. Definitely. Marcel, you're in tier 1 support. Okay, good place. With the CCNA, an AWS cloud practitioner, and you're working on Security Plus and CCSK. You want to be a cloud security administrator. Are you on the right path? So Marcel, here's what I would do if I was on you. I would skip the Security Plus. I would skip the CCSK. I would watch the free CCSK course on our channel, and then I would take the CCSP, the Certified Cloud Security Professional from the ISC Squared, because that's going to be a big one. Now, the next thing that I would probably do is I would bump up the AWS Cloud Practitioner to an AWS Solutions Architect Associate or Professional. I would probably say Professional. And the reason is AWS has a whole bunch of free exam retakes, and 90% of the world, and you can buy a practice exam, which will give you an exact copy of the AWS exam. So for the most part, managers know that most people that have passed, say, a solutions architect associate probably don't know anything. You could be great and know everything, but for the most part, the people that are passing it don't know. So if I had a CCSP and an AWS solutions architect professional, now you're looking pretty good to me. And then you already have the CCNA, which means you know how to configure things like packet filters, access lists, that kind of thing. I think you should be pretty good to go. And it will get you there. Now, Marcel, I'd like you to think of this. And I really want you to keep this in the back of your mind. Do I really want to be an admin? And do I really think there's going to be a demand for admins 3 years from now? Now, I want you to understand that in the old days, I needed a lot of admins, a tremendous amount. I needed people to add usernames and passwords, boot up computers, lock down an operating system, manually intensive labor stuff. But right now where I'm at, I can have one DevOps engineer replace 100 cloud admins and write an infrastructure as code split and do more in one day than the 50 admins could have done in 6 months worth of work. So I do want you to be concerned about that. If you are in a higher level engineering role, it's still a concern. But if you're an engineering role and you master a few things, and we can talk about that if that's a goal, you'll still be safe. But the key is can AI do a better job than the average admin? And the answer is right now, yes. So when you're actually trying to apply for a job or find a job, unfortunately now, in the old days, you had to be better than the competition. Now you have to be better than AI and the competition. So there's not a lot of need for cloud security admins. I don't need somebody to manually configure 100 different firewalls. I can configure all 100 at the same time with an infrastructure as code script. So I would say bump it up to a cloud security engineer. And you don't need to stop at the admin level. Get the CCSP, get a CISSP while you're at it, and get that AWS Solutions Architect Professional. Name your $150,000 security job, assuming you get the right training too and you learn the right skills, engineering wise. Bump that up, learn your executive skills, and get a $230,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 security architect job. So I still think you have options either. Well, Marcel, there's a lot of it. We don't need a lot of admins. Admins are AI can do what admin work can. AI can do some of what the engineering work, but AI will never have the deep judgment. So go for a small number of very deep certifications and you'll be good. And also learn the material. Learn how to build it if you want to be an engineer. Learn how to design it if you're an architect. Why don't you try to join us for a free webinar? And that way I can quiz you. I can see where you're at, see what you know, see what you don't know, and make recommendations and find out if you want architect or engineer, because you can do either. You can do anything you want. I just want to get you the right goal. So if you've got another question, drop it in the chat box. If not, join us in the free webinar on Thursday. My team will drop a link to that free webinar. And if anybody has questions, please feel free. I want to help. What's my thoughts on Charles Burst saying that successful EA must be hybrid, using design-driven principles for long-driven strategy while using data-driven insights for flexibility? Well, yeah. So the key of all enterprise architecture roles is we are business executives that still know technology. And that is a hybrid role. Same thing for a cloud architect. We're not engineers. We can't focus too deeply on the tech. We can't configure anything. We've got to all take this big picture view and look at everything that we need. And since enterprise architecture really is determining the right operating model for a business, then determining the way to best achieve that, which is, what kind of processes can you actually have? What are the optimal processes? And for example, with the optimal process, what does the person need? So we have to look at the way the person works to truly understand it. So I'll give you an example of poor process optimization. So 25 years ago, I used to practice internal medicine, T. Irvin. I'm a nurse practitioner. It was a fun job. And here's what the process was. The person would come into the room. The medical assistant would take their blood pressure and their pulse and their respirations. They put it on the chart. They'd ask the patient what brought him in today. I'd look at the room. I'd walk in the room. As soon as I got outside the room, there would be a door. It had a piece of paper. I'd look at the piece of paper. A patient came in today complaining of XYZ problem. Okay, I know why they're here. Because somebody else asked them, and I know that their blood pressure, pulse, and respirations are stable, meaning it's not an emergency. So I knock on the door, I walk in the room, and I ask a second time, in case the person didn't give the right information to the medical assistant, what brings you in today? And that's the problem. The same thing as an architect. So as soon as they come in the old days, what I would do is I would ask them a whole lot of questions about the problem. What makes it better? What makes it worse? And then I would also ask other questions each time. Are you sleeping? Or have any problems with this? Having any problems with this? Having any problems with this? And then I'd say, here's your diagnosis, and here's what I'm going to do about it. Here's your prescription, your physical therapy, or whatever. Now, T. Irving, in the old days, it was very easy. I would do that, and then I literally would pick up my phone. And what I would do is I would talk into the phone, and it would be a recorded message that would either be handled by someone in India or someone in Israel, typically speaking. And what I would do is I'd say, patient T the cat presents today complaining of a sore throat. Upon physical examination, patient's throat is erythematous, lungs clear to auscultation, abdomen soft, non-tender, non-distended, non-bloated. Assessment pharyngitis, plan amoxicillin 500 milligrams 4 times a day. And it was literally that fast, and somebody else would get that, they would transcribe it, and they would email us our transcript. That was the old day. Now, here's the thing. Did you see how fast it was for me to call in and do that little transcription? That gave me 12 minutes with my patient, and I reserved 3 minutes per visit. Now, all of a sudden, the U.S. government says you must use electronic health records. Electronic health records are going to save sense, whatever. And guess what? They said, healthcare organizations, we're going to fine you 2% of Medicare reimbursement if you don't use it, or here's free money to go adopt it. So now, all of a sudden, all the hospitals put these things in. Now, a patient comes in, and I can't look at him anymore because now I've got to look at my computer chart and I got to click, 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 just to be able to document the conversation. Now that takes me 12 minutes. Now, because it's so hard, the computer, the way it was designed, because it wasn't designed by doctors who knew how doctors worked, I now only have 3 minutes left for my patient. Because if I don't see 4 patients an hour, then practice goes bankrupt. So that's the big problem here. So that's why after electronic health records, incidentally knowing, medical errors went from the 5th leading cause of death to the 3rd leading cause of death in the US, because the process got broken. The way the doctors did their job got broken by the new technology. And that's why enterprise architecture is follow the doctors around, follow the nurses around, follow a patient that goes through the hospital, see how patients are registered. And then once you figure that out, could we do it a better way? And then figure out what technologies will best meet the needs of the people. That's enterprise architecture. So I hope that makes sense. Any book recommendations for the security architect? And well, there's not a lot of great things that are out there. There was The Art of Deception by Kevin Mitnick, which was pretty good, which teaches you how hackers think. I will tell you that I really do like the, what's his name? Mike Chappell, CISSP book and CCSP book. I think they're both very, very good. And I think there's a lot of good in that. I think Cisco has got some pretty good books, but they're pretty designed for there's some information you can read on the Cloud Security Alliance's website, which is pretty good. Diving deeply into zero trust frameworks and how you might apply that would be good. There's plenty of good reading and NIST recommendations as well that you could also be kind of good. So, those are the kind of things that you're typically looking for that are out there. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of good architecture books that are out there. I mean, there are in networking, but there's just not that many. And it's the knowledge that's held. It's ridiculous. In my head, at people's heads at Cisco, Checkpoint, Palo Alto, it's like the Wiz, there's a very small number of companies that really have really strong security people. But that's why we created the security architect program, but because it's pretty hard. But those are good places to start, and I think I would start doing those things. So maybe we go out of order, Chris, because I want to actually, address 2 things. So one is Arjit and John asked a question. So let's go to John's question, then we'll go to Arjit's, then we'll go to Michael's, because I really want to get to that. So John said, "Hi, Mike. As a seasoned developer, how did I leverage my experience with design patterns, agile methodologies, coding practices when transitioning into a cloud architect role?" John, I am not a developer. I have never written a single line of code in my life, and architects don't code. So I actually learned architecture via 2 things. One is I had to design I've been designing clouds for providers since 1996. The first cloud I worked on was in 1993. That was the Frame Relay Cloud. I worked on the ISDN Cloud around 1996, and then the ATM Cloud around 1999, and the BGP RFC 2547 Cloud in 2000. And the next cloud that I helped design was the VPLS Cloud. And then I helped design all of these cloud provider type environments. So I've been designing these systems for years. I don't come from an application background. I come from an infrastructure background. Code is the least important component of any kind of architect role. And here's the reason why. If we're moving to a cloud, for example, what are we moving? We're taking a virtual machine to a virtual machine, a container to a container. We're moving a physical load balancer to a virtual load balancer. We're using a physical firewall to a virtual firewall. So 100% of these technologies are cloud technologies, are really data center technologies. And none of that has anything to do with code. So what I will tell you is people that have application architecture knowledge, like knowing what kind of APIs they would use and what kind of data structures they would use, is good, but you won't get that, typically speaking, from learning how to code. So where I learned medicine was because I used to practice internal medicine. And architecture is the same job as medicine. Someone comes in with a problem. You ask a bunch of questions, you make a diagnosis and a plan. So that's what I did. In fact, what I did is when I went into my career, and John, is your name Yanni Mipos? And if it is, let me know in the chat box, because we could have a different conversation. I'm a protimas. But I guess what I'm trying to say is knowing software would be knowing one of all the 1,000 components that you might need to know. So I didn't come from that background. But what I did, and the number of people that I've trained, is I teach them the cloud. What is the cloud? Learn what routers are, learn what switches are, learn what ACLs are, learn what NAT is and the use cases for NAT, learn what your wide area networking options are to connect to the cloud, learn how do you secure, what do your firewalls do, your IDS, IP systems, what do your SIEM systems do, and where do you put them there, where do your IAM systems do, and kind of keep that Yanis. So, those are the kind of things that we're actually talking about that you need to think of. So think of the big picture rather than the code. It doesn't matter your background. It just matters where you're actually from. So I didn't have that software developer experience. Now I can tell you, Yanni, that typically speaking, if I have a software developer, it takes me about 8 to 12 months to get them hired as a cloud architect and retrain. If I have a sales rep, it typically takes me a little less time. And here's the reason. What do we do as architects? We design solutions, we manage stakeholders, we lead teams, we create architectural repositories, we create governance structures, for example. So it's more business functions than we actually do. So architecture is not doing it, it's thinking about it and planning about it. So I don't have a coding background. I actually have a networking background. I'm one of the first Cisco certified internet experts. I've helped design many of the internet providers' strategies. I've consulted to some of the world's largest banks and healthcare institutions and governance on how to design their systems. That's actually my background, not software. And it's a different set of skills. So I hope it helped. And why did I take that out of order? Because Arijit actually went and talked about what he thinks companies are wanting. And that's why I run this. So Arijit, you will not, and Yanni, this is not a job where you are allowed to touch your technology. This is a job where you're meeting with stakeholders, you're leading teams, you're mapping out business processes. And in fact, the CIOs have actually went out there and published, and they said, this is what we want as a cloud architect. Why do people come to us and think it's DevOps and think it's engineering? And you can see it was published in CIO magazine, and this is exactly the job that I've done for the last 25 years. The CIO said, we would like a cloud architect that can lead the cultural change for cloud adoption. So leading the cultural change for cloud adoption, what is that? It means me starting with the CEO or the CIO and getting executive buy-in and asking that CIO, which stakeholders do I need to speak to that can give me this information? Meeting with the stakeholders, developing relationships with these stakeholders, taking the stakeholders' input, creating an architecture with my architecture team, presenting that back to the stakeholders, and the stakeholders saying, yeah, we like this. It also includes creation of marketing collateral, speeches, training. So there's that. And then what they say, what else would you do? What you want your architects to do? And they said, developing and coordinating a cloud architecture. So what is that? That is creation of your architecture team, meeting with your vendors, the vendor solutions architects, managing your vendors, that kind of thing. And developing in the cloud strategy and adoption process, sure. I'm going to use Nutanix or OpenStack in my data center for my high throughput because it's going to perform better and cost less. At the same time, I'm going to use AWS for what it does and Google for what it does work. And what we're going to do is we're going to migrate this way. These applications we're going to take as is. These applications we're going to redesign. This monolith is going to get turned into microservices. So that's the cloud strategy. Now, since there's still no DevOps, SysOps, or coding in the architecture role, they said, what else do you want? Well, they said, find talent with the necessary skills. So I've done 6,000 interviews of technology professionals in my life. That's the reason I'm always looking for talent on my architecture teams. Assessing application software and hardware, again, bringing in a team to assess this. Creating a cloud broker team, yep, we definitely create that. Establish best practice for the cloud. Sure, this is what each demilitarized zone would look like. This is what each remote access zone is going to look like. This is a standard operating system. Our configuration management tools that our engineers will be used will be this. Yeah, that's exactly what we do. So that cloud providers and third-party services, oh yeah, I'm going to invite Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Cisco, and Fortinet for competitions on various security things for my unique workloads. I'm going to do the Cisco, Juniper, Arista, that kind of thing for some of my networking things. I'm going to determine which database we're going to use. We're going to test all these things, or at least my engineers will. So we're going to deal with a lot of that. Now, we also do what's called overseeing governance and mitigating risk. This involves things like creating a governance structure, creating change management procedures, creating architectural review boards. And then it says working closely with IT security people to monitor privacy and develop incident response procedures. Oh, yeah. So if we've got this business continuity plan, this disaster continuity plan, if the company gets hacked, this person speaks to regulators, this lawyer speaks to this person does the work, this person speaks to the press, all of that. And monitor budgets, manage budgets, and estimate costs. That's what we do. So there's no hands-on. So the people that have the easiest time are not actually the people that are actually coming from technology. And I want you to understand, why is it? Why is it that it doesn't matter where your background is? So I'm going to actually give you the list of skills that you actually need to be an architect. You're going to need CXO relevancy, which is the ability to walk in and communicate to the C-suite in their language of their choice. You're going to need to know business, because architecture is about business optimization. You can't optimize business if you don't know business. You're going to have to know business. You're going to have strong leadership skills, because architecture is not you. You have to create an architecture team and lead a 15 to 50 person team. Now, you're going to have to communicate with stakeholders. So you're going to need a lot of stakeholder management skills. You're going to have to help sell the architecture to the client, which means sales skills. You're going to have great communication skills, because you're going to be gathering requirements. You're going to be giving presentations constantly, including the interview. And you're going to have some degree of vendor management and executive presence skills. Now, there are the business skills you need, negotiation skills too. Now, when we get to the technical skills, we're talking about networking design skills, like wide area networking, address planning, BGP, compute, whether you're going to use a server or a container or a function as a service kind of thing, storage, like block storage, object storage, file storage, RAID, security design, things like your demilitarized zones, your policies, your data loss preventions, what have you, firewalls, your big data design, like your streaming data, your data lakes, etc., and then your cloud design and your AI. So the reason it doesn't matter is, let's say, for example, you were a software developer and you knew applications. Do you know what you wouldn't know? AI, big data, security, storage, compute, sales, executive presence, emotional intelligence, leadership. You won't know. Now, what happens if you come to me and you're already a sales rep? And now you've already got CXO relevancy, business acumen, leadership skills, sales skills, stakeholder management skills, communication skills are great, presentation skills are great, executive presence. Now all you've got to learn is the tech piece, which is a whole lot less than the software developer that has to learn all the tech except for software, as well as all the business things. So, Arjit, don't worry. It doesn't matter. You know what a person's first job is after learning how to fly a plane? An airplane pilot. Do you know what a physician's first job is? A physician. Do you know what an attorney's first job is? As an attorney. So don't be fearful. Get the right education, the right career development. So the day you graduate and get hired, you're a leader in your field. That's what I did. I wasn't hired in any entry-level role. I never started in an admin role, a help desk role. I was hired as a senior engineer, and 3 months later, I was an architect, the lead architect, in fact. In fact, you can do the same. So maybe join us on the webinar. We can assess you. We can see what you're ready, but always believe in yourself and know that you can do anything you desire. T. Irving, you were reading the business architecture section of the TOGAF standard, and it read very much like a senior business analyst role. Is there an overlap with an architect and an analyst, or can it be shared? It's not really. So an analyst to me is someone that collects numbers and does a little bit of research. The enterprise architect is an executive. So yes, there is a degree of analyzing data, but typically speaking, the business analyst would give the other people, like the exec, like an enterprise architect, the data that they've actually done. So they would be the source of your information or a helper for you. So the enterprise architect is the strategist. Now, when you read through TOGAF, how can I say this? I am a member of the open group. We respect the open group. We love their work, but you know, it's a framework. Do this. This is what we like to call our documents. This is a kind of a cool naming convention kind of suggestion idea. here's this thing, here's this thing. Now, we're not going to teach you how to do it, but this is this. It's a little rigid, but I still think it's good. What's the key to really know about business architecture as an enterprise architect? How does the business operate? What is the business competitive advantage? What are the key business processes? Because if I know the business's, let's say, value streams, which is part of business architecture, that's what gives the organization its competitive advantage. So if I know where that organization has its competitive advantage, maybe I can leverage technology to give them an even bigger competitive advantage in that way. What if that organization has a bottleneck here? There's some little inefficiency in the process where all the sales are coming in and all the manufacturing is going out, but it's stalled because they need one component and they can't seem to source that component. Well, maybe part of the enterprise architecture is creating a different supply chain that can have 2 and 3 and 4 sources for that component. So that's no longer a bottleneck. That's more enterprise architecture. That's more business architecture. So they're not really very similar, even though they do probably have some commonalities between them. In much the way a nurse is in healthcare and doing very critically important work, and a physician's in healthcare who's also doing very critically important work. But for the most part, the physician creates the plan and the nurse carries out the plan or does the plan. It's a different set of skills. Both are important. Good questions. Please feel free to ask as many questions. I really do want to help. Hello, why Palo Alto comes in at a high salary? So all the best companies that you want to work for have high salaries. Who's got huge salaries? On our document. So certain companies pay very well. Palo Alto is one of them. Cisco is one of them. IBM is one of them. And why do they pay well compared to other good companies? Well, to these companies, they consult on strategy. Cisco is all about strategy. How do I optimize your performance? How do I make you better? And how do you run the best team? Like a team that owns 40 plus percent market share. You hire the best and the most capable, and those people cost the most. So if we've got a company that's deeply concerned about technology, like a bank, they're willing to pay their people far, far more than another company whose technology is just some necessary evil for them to do their job. It's not their competitive advantage. And typically speaking, when it comes to this, there's going to be always a couple of companies that are always on the bleeding edge. Google pays their developers a lot, far more than most organizations. Banks will pay their networking people, their security people, and their cloud people enormous amounts of money, because an outage of 5 minutes in a bank could be $100 million loss. So they need the people that know how to do it, and it's that. So that's typically why you're referring to. Some companies are always on the bleeding edge, and they are willing to pay to get the top 1%, 1/10 of 1%. And I'll tell you, they take good care of their people. For example, when I was at Cisco, and I was there for about a decade, not only did they pay for the majority of my MBA, they gave me about $100,000 of leadership and other technical training as well. Go take this $5,000 leadership class, this $3,000 presentation class, this $8,000 presentation class, this executive presence kind of class, because they wanted their people to be so good that when the Cisco people walked in compared to anybody else, the Cisco people looked like lions and everybody else looked like kittens. So, I'd rather be the lion. So that's typically why you see this. There's lots of great companies, but generally speaking, some companies that are at the bleeding edge, EMC was another one of those companies that used to pay incredibly well. And they do that and they get some really, really, really great people. And they use tech to its complete competitive advantage. Great question there. Marcel, your main concern at the moment was to get out of help desk. Yes, I think that's a good idea. So your first step would be an admin role where you work your way up to engineer. But you think I should go straight up for that? Yeah. So here's what I think, Marcel. I think it'll take you a year to 2 years to get an admin role. And I think it'll take you a year to become a cloud security architect by comparison. And here's the reason. Here's what everybody does right now. And I wish it wasn't the case. Everybody gets out of college or whatever, and somebody told them to get an A+, a Net+, and a Security+. And at the end of the day, they are really good, what I like to call pre-fundamental certifications. They take someone that knows nothing about tech, and that gives them the fundamentals to potentially learn tech. I think it's great for that. Here's the thing. I could start someone with a CCNA instead of the Network Plus, and they'll get all the fundamentals, and then they'll get a whole lot more. So typically for me, I always went there. So I'll tell you about me, Marcel. So I was practicing internal medicine, and I just did not want to go from a job that paid me very well to a job that paid me in an admin role when I left medicine. So what I did is I prepared myself for a deeper role. So I could tell you, I'll give you a few people. So Michael in the UK, he was a sysadmin, and we retrained him, and he got his first job as a cloud security architect. But by comparison, Emmanuel never worked in tech, and he was with us for about a year, and he just got hired as a cloud security architect, also in the UK. And quite frankly, in less time than the other Michael. At the same time, Wallace Agana in the UK, for example, whose last job was a sales rep, was then hired as an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase. You can see a video of him. At the same time, I had a student, Ivan Tambo, who was a college student. Great kid. I mean, if you met him, you'd love him. But this kid, great energy, great motivation. He was a waiter going to Georgia Tech. He took our course, and then he was hired by AWS as his first job. As it turned out, his best friend, Jordan Kitko, was a student of ours who also took the course with him and is also working at AWS. And not as an associate architect, as a real architect. Around that time, Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom, came with us, and she got hired. So it really doesn't, as an architect at Microsoft. And Jawad at the same time was a cloud engineer who took with 10 years experience. So we also got hired at AWS in about a year. So Jermaine sold landscaping gear, but got his first enterprise architect job. It doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is there's almost no job out there other than a physician, an attorney, and a strategy consultant that honestly look anything like a cloud architect job. Get the right training, get the right skills, and you can do anything you want. So aim higher, train bigger. Because at the end of the day, Marcel, it's not easy to do a Security Plus. By the time they're done making that exam hard, it's not going to be easy. But I could spend an extra month with you, and you could pass the CISSP instead. And when you pass that CISSP, the world's going to go, whoa, and want to talk to you. So I kind of hope these things sort of make sense. So go after your dreams, fight it. You can do it. There's nothing that should hold you back. Maybe join us on the webinar on Thursday. I'd love to talk to you, meet you face to face. And I can assess you. You may have some strengths that already make you better than you even realize. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's all lessons, but maybe you're there. But I'll give you honest feedback. And because I just want to help you, and I know you're going to do well no matter what, as long as you've got the right plan and you fight towards it. So I think you got a great plan getting out of help desk. Not because I don't love help desk people, I do, but it's not going to be a place you want to stay too long term in your career. So hope that helps, and I'd love to meet you. Eddie, en route to finish the AWS Architect Associate. Excellent. You have a cloud practitioner. You believe you passed the test, but don't want projects to begin with and where to go from there. You want experience. So, Eddie, what career do you desire? Because let's say I did surgery in my past life. Is that going to count as experience to be an attorney? The answer is not. It's just experience. For example, if someone sets up a WordPress website, and me and another architect, one of the principal architects at AWS the other day, we were joking about it together, and they were saying, there's people out there that never made it, that couldn't get an architect job. They're telling people, here, build a WordPress website. It's a project that's going to get you hired. And the two of us talked about all the reasons why it would never get anybody hired. So we need to know what it is. If it's an architect job, there's a lot of things that I can tell you that you would need to do as practice that'll give you experience. if it's an engineering job, it's going to be a completely different set of skills that you will need. So let me know which job you want, and then I can help you back into skills and projects. But you want to be an airplane pilot, don't go to medical school, and don't go to do medical school projects. And that's one of the biggest problems we see, Eddie, which is why I do this, is everybody wants to get hands-on, but they learn all the wrong hands-on things. They learn hands-on for another job. So let me know your ultimate goal, and I'll do anything I can to help you. Great question, though. I just need more information to answer it. You have experience in networking. That's usually good because a lot of things are tied to networking. Your recent experiences in big data, getting into cloud architecture. You have the AWS Architect Associate. Is getting the AWS security followed by the AWS networking? So, John, I really don't know what you say you're getting into cloud architecture. So, John, I'm going to ask you a couple questions. And here's the reality of cloud architecture. And I'm going to show you why doing the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, the AWS Security, which I would tell you, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the AWS Advanced Networking, why it's not going to get you anywhere on its own. So if I were to ask you, John, and I told you that the organization's weighted average cost of capital is 7%, how would you weigh that information to determine whether you should build them a private cloud or leverage a public cloud solution? Would you be able to answer that? If I were to ask you, for example, simple architectural things like how would you accommodate around the poor storage performance of block storage to get near data center like storage performance in the cloud? Would you be able to answer it? If I were to ask you, and maybe you do know, could you give me a strategy to make sure I don't have out of order packets that I can try home to 3 different cloud providers with three different links with load share across all 3 links without getting out of order packets? Would you be able to create that BGP policy and design the strategy, for example? So if I were to ask you, how would you design the demilitarized zone for a mission critical web application? Could you answer that? So if the answer is yes to these questions, and could you go sell $1 billion to the CIO of a solution? If the answer is yes, then you're good to go. And these certifications will help you get an interview. But if the answer is no, you're not going to be there. So here's what's in the AWS Advanced Security. Almost nothing when it comes to security. So if you're a CISSP already or a CCSP, good, you're going to know something. But the AWS Security Advanced has almost no security, and it teaches you a bunch of AWS security services, which guess what? You probably can't use. And sure, you'll be able to use some things like an AWS Macie, what have you, but in the reality, you're not going to use AWS WAF. And the reason you're not going to use AWS WAF is it doesn't have behavioral anomaly detection. You're going to be using SIEM systems that are from providers other than AWS, and you're not going to use any of the AWS security stuff. You're going to need, in most cases, bigger, more industrial tools across all 3 clouds, especially since everybody's multi-cloud. Now, the AWS networking, well, it has no networking in it, but it does teach you the name of the AWS things, and it does teach you how a transit gateway is different than a direct connect gateway. So again, it's going to be a good vocabulary test on AWS things. But it's not none of these are architecture exams. It's not like a CCDE where you're given a case study and you have to create an architectural solution, and then you have to present the architectural solution back to the client. And then the client has to ask you questions on the architectural solution, and you'll have to defend your decisions and the architectural trade-offs that you made and why you chose to make them. See, that's architecture. So, John, why don't you join us in the free webinar, and we'll go over, and I'll assess you. I'll assess your BGP skills if you desire. I'll assess your network architecture skills, and I can assess where your skills are, and I can make a real strong recommendation. But generally speaking, if I was you and I was looking to, after I was taught how to become an architect, now the key is you're not going to learn it in the certification, but after I was taught, I'd probably do something like this. I'd probably get an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, because that'll get you an interview. Now, that's the name of the service and how to configure it, which architects don't do, but it will get you an interview. I would get a TOGAF 10, which is what I teach these things to all my students. And I would get a security thing like a CISSP, Because the CISSP, you're going to learn security. You're going to learn a lot about security. You might even get 10% of the skills you actually need for the job out of just the CISSP, where the AWS Solutions Architect Professional might be 5%, and TOGAF might be 5%. So that'll get you to 20%. And then the rest of your architectural training will get you the rest of the way. But that's going to get you a whole lot of interviews. And then if your architectural knowledge is good, you're going to be there. But you can do two things. One is join us in the webinar on Thursday. My team dropped the link. Also, there's lots of resources in the description of this video about guides on all the skills and certifications that we recommend and why we recommend them and what they can do or not do for you. But I would skip the AWS security. I really would. How do companies invest in people to help improve their executive and business acumen? So, Darius, typically speaking, is all companies will have the option to have tuition reimbursement, and most companies will have the option to send you to various forms of training. Now, not everybody gets the equivalent. So typically what happens is if you are in a management or a leadership position or an architect position, they've got a big budget for you. And so why would I give my solutions architect $20,000 a budget this year? Well, if I send my solutions architect to $5,000 of sales training, and then I send them to $5,000 of some AI training that's AI architecture related, and then I send them to $5,000 of presentation training and another $5,000 of executive presence training. Now, Darius, why might I do that? Because I might have a solutions architect that's okay at sales, and that solutions architect and that account manager can close 50% of the deals. Now, what if by comparison, I could dump $20,000 that year into the person and close and take them from 50% of the deals to 65% of the deals because they're better? Now, in that particular case, I might cost me $20,000, but bring in an extra 10, 15, 20, $30 million. So that's why they'll do it. But generally speaking, they'll give the best training to the people that are in pre-sales roles that bring money in, like an architect, to the executives. And that's just a matter of being in a great company and asking your manager for support and also checking what your HR division has. But also, let's say you're not in a leadership role, but let's say I got a rock star engineer. And this is an engineer that's really, really good, like the best of the best. And I know that AI is going to cut my engineering staff by 30% in the next 3 years. Those engineers that I love, that are the best of the best, that are super competent, that are helping others, I'm sending them for sales training and leadership training and executive training. So when I do a layoff, I don't lay them off because I never lay off my best. I move them to sales roles, solutions architect roles, and manager roles. So you have to actually be doing your job, pouring your heart and soul into doing your job. But yeah, these kind of things are really going to be serious. And yes, they'll constantly do it. And that's why they do it. But who do you invest in? You're not going to invest in somebody that job hops every 3 months. You got a resume and the person stayed at a job for 1 year and then they've got 6 months to the next, and then 6 months at the next, and a year in the next one. You generally don't hire that person. But more importantly, you're not going to invest in that person because any investment you make is going to go to your competition or another employer 6 months later. But I've got a person, they're stable, they're here, they're an A-level player. They do everything they want well. And then they say, I want training. Sure. What kind of training would you like? Here you go. While you're out there, spend a couple extra days at a nice hotel, eat a couple meals, get some extra steak and lobster, have some good wine and champagne, and have a good time. And come back and be better for me. So yeah, that's the kind of thing. So that's kind of what you need to think about. Every decision a business makes has to look at where they put their money. If I invest in my people, what can they achieve? If I invest in my technology, what can they achieve? If my people aren't doing anything and don't want to work, I invest in robotics and automation. If my people are so awesome, I invest in my people and give them a competitive advantage. So it's all about what the business is, the way business uses people. But if you're a company like Cisco loves to say, well, look, this is the person that designed 50% of the internet. They have all these degrees, all these certifications. Oh, they're this. You should listen to them. And they put these people in super high paid positions. They'll pay to get that education and train it. So I kind of hope this is an example. Okay. Really don't know where to start, to be completely honest. Can you give me an example of a simple beginner architecture project? Can you run video games through AWS? So here would be an architecture, a real life basic architecture. Eddie, design me an enterprise computing environment that's going to need 1,000 virtual machines spread across 3 clouds. It's going to have web applications which need to be properly secured in strong demilitarized zones. We're going to have remote access users that are going to have to come in via a safe VPN environment. You're going to have to keep your data from one location in the US, not replicated overseas. You're going to have to keep your European data not replicated automatically by the cloud outside the EU for GDPR regulations. And at the same time, you're dealing with sensitive data, which can't be exposed, mission critical data, which can't be exposed, and an AI learning application. Create the strategy for this, document the strategy, present the strategy, determine what its cost is going to be, and give me a return on an investment capital model. That's architecture. That's what my students do with me, because that's what architects do. Another architecture project could be, how would you secure your multi-cloud environment and create a reference architecture for high security, medium security, and non-critical security environments? Again, that would be an architectural process. You could be creating an architecture for an agentic AI strategy for a certain thing, but that's architecture. So architecture is a strategic plan or a blueprint. So, maybe this will help. Let me kind of try to show you what an architecture document looks like. And the good news is, this document that I'm going to show you, I actually wrote when I was at Cisco. And not only did I write it at Cisco, it was publicly facing on the Cisco website, so I can legally share it, whereas most architectural things. So this is an architectural project. Oops, nope, that's not going to work. Bear with me. Bear with me a second. Nope, not that one. Here we go. Okay, so here's what an architectural document is going to look like. And here was a reference architecture. This would be a project that you can build. So this was a reference architecture with me and my friend Howard on how you would design architectures for the healthcare industry. So first, it includes a table of concept, and we talk about the wide area network and the metropolitan area networks, what we would do in the data center, what we would do with various layers in the data center, how we would put our servers, what we would do on the edge, what our campuses would be designed like. And we get into radio frequency management and what have you. And then we would have an overview of the architecture, for example, and what problems we're trying to solve with it. And then as we go through the architecture, we'll talk more about the architecture. For example, in this case, this followed a service-oriented architecture. So we started looking at what we would need at the campus, at the branch, what we put at various infrastructure levels, and we literally explained this. Now, this is an architecture. You can see there's a lot of verbs, there's a lot of writing, and then there's a picture, but it's all to explain it. We write something, we explain it, there's a picture. We write something, we explain it, it's a picture. It's a table, it's a picture, and we address every component of the architecture. And as you'll see, this is a pretty big document that you're seeing. And in the end, we typically tie it with a glossary. So that is an architectural project. This is exactly what an architect does. What an architect doesn't do is we don't do Python scripts. We don't touch the technology, that kind of thing. Hope that helps. Hi, Mike. This is Charlie from the Architect Program. Just joined your boot camp 2 weeks ago. Well, wonderful. So nice to work with you. You enjoy the tech part of the job, but you're not looking forward to the business stuff. How do you overcome it? You do it more and more and more until it's natural. So, I don't like to tell people things that I'm afraid of, but I got to tell you, I've always been afraid of snakes. It's the most ridiculous thing. I live in Florida. There's plenty of snakes, and I've always been afraid of them. Well, a couple of years ago, I rescued this little cat called Cindy. And Cindy decides that she likes to go outside and bring a snake inside the house. So in the first month of Cindy, She brought in 3 snakes until she got the hint not to do this, and I had to carry each snake out of the house. The first time I touched that snake, it was slithery, it was icky. I learned how to do it, but it was gross. The second time, I was a little scared. The third time I did the snake, no big deal. It did happen about 6 or 7 total times, but thankfully it hasn't happened, and it doesn't happen that often. And now I just grab the snake and I know how to grab it. It's no big deal. So the more you practice it, the more you do it, to get better at it. Now, the good news is, if you're a little scared of it, that's a good thing. It's good for people that are new and learning to be scared, because that means they're smart enough to know what they don't know. That's a good quality. The people that typically struggle with the people that think they know it when they don't know it. Now that's going to be a totally different sort of scenario. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But just practice it. Just do it. So what happens is people, when things we're comfortable with, we're comfortable with. Now, what kind of workout do I want to do? I either want to do Olympic lifting, which is the clean and jerk and the snatch, or I want to do powerlifting, which is the squat, the bench press, the deadlift, and I only want to do martial arts as my activities. Well, my back can no longer handle martial arts. My back can no longer handle those activities, so I do different stuff. But if I had my spare chance, that's what I'm going to do all day, every day. Now I can ride on an Airdyne, I can do my yoga, and I can do my other things, so I adapt. So now all of a sudden, yoga is fun for me, and it has been for the last 19 years. Now all of a sudden, that Airdyne bike that people use as a medieval torture device, now all of a sudden I don't hate it. I look forward to it because it gives me a chance to do the best I can with what I have. You'll be great at it, Charlie. Just put in the time, put in the effort, and believe in yourself. That's the biggest thing. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself and believe in yourself. And if you do that, you should be good to go. Zachman and ITL are certifications I often never hear about. What are my recommendation certifications? TOGAF. There's a reason I always recommend that. So here's the thing. 80% use TOGAF. And if you work in a consulting company, you're going to have your own framework anyway. So, that's the key. I recommend TOGAF if I'm going to adopt any other enterprise architecture framework, unless you have a different choice. Maybe you're dealing with the federal government and you've got to use their fee framework. But I typically use TOGAF because everybody does. I mean, almost every major organization that uses an enterprise architecture framework uses that. Zachman, another great framework. Zachman was one of the best early enterprise architects out there. Like all the best architects, they all came from Cisco or IBM in many cases. And he was a big IBM architect, like a chief architect there. And it's a great framework. But all these frameworks are doing the same thing. They're just saying, here's some logical things that you could do. And you'll be good either way. Michael, so are there any courses tailored towards cloud security engineering on our site, or all architecture? If not, how do you start building the skills? So Marcel, I only teach architecture at this point. About 2 years ago, we had a really good cloud engineering program. And we decided to take the students we have, finish them out, and cancel our cloud engineering program. And here's the reason why. AI can write a Terraform script. AI can write a Python script. AI can write a Bash shell script, a Windows PowerShell script. And I looked at that and said, I don't want to train people for jobs that companies will probably eliminate 30 to 40% of them in the next years. But cloud architecture or security architecture or enterprise architecture can never be replaced by AI. And here's the reason. Architects don't code. Architects don't configure. Architects don't touch the tech. We lead a team. We sell a solution. We give a presentation. We facilitate a meeting. We lead a team for the architectural creation. We create governance structures. We manage stakeholders. We manage vendors. We entertain clients. We play golf with clients. We take them for dinners and drinks. So, all in all, the whole job of the architect is really managing relationships, translating, say, risk into actionable solutions. So, that's why we do it. So for us, we recommend the security. Typically recommend security architectures. Now, the only good security engineering thing I've ever seen out there that's any good, let me just I'll send you the link. Um, drawing a blank who I'm looking for now. I want to say SIAC, but no, but it's there's one company out there that does run a very good security engineering weekly training. It is about $7,000 for the week compared to our security architect program, which is until you're hired and 1,000+ hours of training that covers everything that you would need to know. But that is a good training. I think it's the SANS Institute. I want to find it for you because it is good, and theirs is focused on engineering. Yeah, the SANS Institute has does have a good 1 week engineering training program that I can recommend if engineering is your goal. But if architecture is your goal, we could easily help with your cloud security architect program. But I try to focus everything on architects because architect jobs pay more. Architects are less competitive because nobody can find one and everybody needs one. And my expertise is architecture. I've been an architect for 25 years. I've gotten people hired at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Palo Alto, Netspoke, Zscaler. I've gotten people hired everywhere. And because of this, I focus on architecture, which is what we tend to do. I would say stay out of cloud engineering, but I would say stay out of software engineering. I do see people having an opportunity to work as engineers in security because of the critical cybersecurity shortages, but I like architecture. Marcel, please either ask me or join us on Thursday on the architecture webinar. We can really get a feel for where you're at. But we teach architecture, and we're real good at it. And in that program, not only do we teach you how to be a security architect first. For example, we do 4 days a week of training live on how to be an architect. Then you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of security content. And then we get you certified after we teach you architecture with the CISSP, which is the king of all certifications. Then we get you the CCSP and the CISM, which are basically the queen of all certifications, and we marry them together. And of course, we teach you zero trust and everything else. So that's what we do. I think you'd love it, and it'll cost you less than and it's 60% off. It'll be less than 25% of the week you spend at the SANS Institute. But I can say the SANS Institute is good and credible, that they do provide quality content. You're an AZ cloud architect. You would like to use AI to assist you, but you also lack deep understanding of DevOps, AKS. What should your approach be? Use many migration projects. So first thing that I would do is I'd learn architecture. And architecture is not DevOps. So I'd focus on architecture. So Rajvender, so here's the question I have for you. How much knowledge do you have in business performance optimization? How much knowledge do you have in leading large teams of 15 to 50 people? How much knowledge do you have of optimizing business processes? There's a reason I'm answering you this. If you don't know that, your architectures will be non-helpful to the client. And how bad will they be? 70 to 80% of the time when the architects don't have the lack the business skills, the architectures provide zero business for the business benefit. So what it really means is instead of a company investing on its people, they invest in technology, it doesn't work, they get nothing out of it, and then they have to do a layoff. So an architect that doesn't do no business, that first thing that I would do is I'd say learn business. Now, the second thing is I need you to be more understanding of why you probably shouldn't use Azure Kubernetes service in today's world. So in your model world, 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. Now we decide to use the Azure control plane for my Kubernetes environment. Now Azure goes down, but I still have AWS and Google up. Now I can't scale in and scale out because my control plane's gone because I made the architectural mistake of using AKS. Now, by comparison, Mr. Singh, I could use OpenStack, which is managed from IBM, and I can use that as on all my clouds. And that way the AWS cloud can go down and I've got no problem with my workloads on Azure, Google, and Nutanix cloud. So the key is you should probably know why you shouldn't be using AKS in the first place. I don't need you to know DevOps. I need you to understand DevOps processes, but I do need you to understand security so you don't get hacked. I do need you to understand high availability design so you're good. I do need you to understand compute deeply, what kind of processor you use, what the workloads look like, so you know how to select the right kind of compute option, when you should use a function as a service versus application virtualization versus a container, the strengths and weaknesses of each one, and the trade-offs. So that's what I would tell you to do. You can't use AI to assist you because the AI is not going to be strong enough for architecture. AI can write a Python script for a software developer or a cloud engineer. But here's the reason AI can't assist you. If I have architectural option A is very simple. It's simple to deploy. But in order to integrate with others, now we're going to need to create a middleware structure, which means now we're going to have to maintain the middleware. Architectural option A will make it much harder to integrate into someone else. Architectural option A will have this problem. If this system goes down, everything goes down. By comparison, architectural option B is a little more complex, but it'll give us more agility and the speed to change the directions much more quickly. We won't need any integration services, but instead what we're going to manage is network complexity. Therefore, based after analyzing all these results, this seems to be in the best interest of the company. I'm going to document this up as my recommended option, document the backup architectural options, and present both of them to the key stakeholders and ask which one is going to be better for their business. And then after that, I'll go back and finalize it. That's architecture. So no, AI is not going to help you here. Now, here's where AI can help you. So let's say a customer gives you a 300-page RFP that says, I need a response. And now you work for Microsoft, and Microsoft has trained a generative AI application, a small language model, on all of the Azure documentation. And all of the Microsoft documentation written by Microsoft that's known to be 100% credible. Now that information, they stick in an LLM. And now when you get an RFP response and you're asked a question, you can pop that question in the RFP response and you'll get a stock answer that'll be good enough. You'll tune that answer and then give it to your tech writer to optimize it. That you can do. So you've got to look at the good news is what AI can't do the architect job. That's why we can't be replaced by AI. So it'll help you respond to an RFP. But if you're going to look something up, you're going to have to go to the vendor's documentation. You can't use AI. You need the source. And that's, why, architects, physicians, attorneys, we all go to very credible sources of information. The New England Journal of Medicine, for example, or maybe we get something out of Forbes or CIO magazine or the Lancet or the British Medical Journal. We go to responsible places to get our information. That you could do. You could train a model in Azure documentation if you work for Microsoft, or they could, and you can use it for that. But no, you're going to actually need to think these. You're going to need to plan these. You're going to consider the company's 50 to 100 different applications and where they're going to be. You're going to have to consider, okay, if we use this IP addressing plan versus this IP addressing plan, this is going to add complexity versus scalability versus route summarizability. And you're going to have to weigh very complicated things. So, nope, you can't use AI to help you with your architect job for the most part. But you can use it if you were an engineer. But here's the good news. You can actually learn all these technologies, and you can learn them so well. And you can learn the business functions. Just like a doctor, they go to their head, and then they check and make sure they're right. But you'll know it in your head. You'll have no problem. That's what I would do. But if you don't have the deep understanding, get the deep understanding. We'd be happy to train you, but make sure you've got deep understanding on cloud computing, data centers, and business optimization. Do you need experience in solution architecture to get a job as an AWS cloud architect? Absolutely not. So I already talked about earlier today, I picked Yvonne and Jordan, who went over to AWS, and that was their first tech job ever. And it took me 8 months to train them. And why am I saying this? Because Jawad, who I also worked with, who'd been a cloud engineer for 10 years, it took me 10 months to train him and get him hired. Al was a sales rep hired as Deloitte as a senior solutions architect after our training as his first tech job ever. First one. But he was properly trained. So Jennifer got hired by JP Morgan Chase. She was a mental health tech. Her first job was a solutions architect. Delroy Batt was driving an ambulance as an emergency medical technician. In his first job, he got a job at Bridgestone while he was in our program. And when he graduated our program, he got a job at CDW as a security architect. You need to have the skills as if you had the architect job. You don't need to have the experience. Daniel Boschool dropped out of high school, but JP Morgan Chase still hired him, and it was his first tech job ever after we trained him. Or just got her first, this is an associate solution architect job, but the only thing we worked with Or with was her interview. By comparison, Nafuli was a student we trained, and he took a bigger architect role called the chief technology officer as his first job. So how are you going to get experience in solution architecture unless you get trained? You're not going to. We don't do what engineers do. We have nothing in common, which is why I had Harshu's probably one of the best cloud engineers I've ever met. And yes, it took me about a year or 12, actually about 14 months to kick him from cloud engineer to hired as a cloud architect. But at the same time, you gave me Jermaine, who was selling landscaping gear. 9 months later, Jermaine's hired as an enterprise architect because it's not where you start. It's your skills. Here's what we care about as hiring managers. First, can you do the job? That's what we care about. Can you do the job? Can I trust you? Is your energy, your enthusiasm, your passion great? Can you, and I'll tell you, were you willing to go above and beyond? And after doing 5,000 architect interviews, here's what I'm going to tell you, what I look for when I do an interview. I have to look for the technical competency, and I have to look for the business competency. From the business competency, the first question I ask myself when that person comes in the room is, can I put that person in front of the client's chief executive officer, chief financial officer, and chief information officer? Why is that? Because the architect's supposed to be seen as an advisor. So can I bring this person to a multi-billionaire CEO, and will the CEO respect them? That's the first thing I look for, because if the answer is no, it doesn't matter how good they are. I can't hire them because that's the job. That means the person needs executive presence and CXO relevance. And the next thing that I ask myself is, can this person lead an architecture team? Meaning, can they create the architecture team on demand, get everybody aligned, all working together for an RFP response or an architectural? And if they can do that, I say yes. If they can't do that, I can't hire them. So this is before I ever get to the tech. Now, the next thing I ask myself is, does the person have the right communication skills? Can they collect the right information and communicate it without making errors? Person doesn't have communication skills, can't do the job. They'll make mistakes every single time. It's going to bankrupt a company. They'll go bankrupt, and 100,000 people will lose their job. So I can't hire anybody without pristine communication skills. Now, the next thing is, does the person know business? If my architect's job is to make sure that the business does better with technology and the architect doesn't know business, it's like a chef that doesn't know what an oven is, a pot or a pan, or what ingredients are. They can't do it, so I can't hire them. So these are the first things that I actually ask myself. Then I see, is the person motivated? Do they seem smart? Do they seem like they can learn quickly? That covers long before I worry about the person's competency. Now let me ask the person's competency. And this is why you typically need architecture training. Here's how I assess competency. I ask someone to do the architect job right in front of me, or I give them something to take home. And what does that mean? Well, I might ask a question, for example, that will force them to be able to tell me whether they know things or they don't know things. So maybe I give someone a scenario, and in the scenario, like an MBA business case you would get, after the scenario, I'm going to ask the person, what's the key business problem you're trying to solve? And what are the architectural options you have to solve those business problems? And in terms of solving that architecture, let's talk about what's play with the people side. Let's talk about what's at play at the process side. Let's talk about what's at play at the technology. What systems will we need in the architecture? What systems need to talk to what other systems? Where are going to be the architectural challenges to design what we need to do? Where are going to be the key gotchas and the thing to look for? For this particular design that we're going to create, what do you think are the security concerns given the architecture? Now, what's going to be necessary to take this architecture and bring it to a real solution? Things like statements of work, governance structures, training materials. And by the way the person can actually respond to those questions, I know whether they know architecture or not. I don't care if they have experience, if they can answer that. But if somebody's been an engineer for 25 years and they can't answer that, I still can't hire them. I hire on competency, competency, competency. So keep that in the back of your mind. You don't need experience. You have to be good. I can give you examples of people that are getting hired all the time with no background, but you've got to be good. You got to be an architect, not an engineer, not a psychologist, not a software developer, not a network engineer. You've got to be exactly what they're looking for. You do that. The shortage is so bad. It is so bad. I think there's one more I can answer, and then I have to finish for the day. What's my view on the possibility of getting a new enterprise role given the current market situation? You're going to get one if you're properly trained. AI and the impact of layoffs. So the more AI, the more architect jobs exist. Because think about it this way. You hire really good enterprise architects that can look at the business, understand the business's functions. Now, what do? We can cut costs. And the things that architects do, lead an architecture team, give a presentation, AI can't do any of that. So the more AI exists, the more architect jobs that happen. Who was going to be laid off? Kepler, if you look 2-3 years ago, we made things. First, you would have noticed 2 years ago that we said we are canceling our engineering program because we see huge layoffs in engineering. And actually, I'll do one more question. I'm going to answer Yanni's question before we leave. So the first thing is we have on this is we have to think of it from a big perspective. We wrote on all kinds of magazines, every HR magazine, every tech publication. We said, get out of engineering. There's going to be a lot of layoffs. Google's running 25% of their code with AI. I expect a substantial number of software developer and engineering layoffs in the next 3 years to the tune of about 30%. I also expect massive hiring in AI architects, cloud architects, security architects. And if you've got architecture skills and people know you can get a job very easily. So no problem for enterprise architect jobs given the world. So Kepler, here's what I want you to look at. Have you ever noticed like a company like Cisco, they lay off 10,000 people and the next day they have 1,000 positions open for solutions architects and sales engineers and enterprise architects for consulting? There's a reason for that. So you'll see it on and on and on. And even IBM, when they did their layoffs, they said, we're removing these people, but we're not touching anybody in customer facing roles like architects. So don't worry about the market, worry about your skills, be great. Every great job and promotion I got was in a bad economy. When I was at WorldCom, there was there for 3 months, they did like a massive 20% layoff and I got promoted to lead architect. Now, after that, I left and I went to Wall Street. And then from Wall Street, I went to Comcast, and Comcast, I went to Riverstone. I was very happy at Riverstone. There were 18 layoffs while I was at Riverstone, 18 of them. Now, I was also asked in many cases to participate in who gets laid off. And the questions that the managers will always ask were, they're always going to ask for who's the best I have, who's the worst I have, who are the people that care, who's the people that don't care. So there's that. And then if you'll notice a lot of other companies, Cisco was one of them, GE is another one, and whether they do it or not, they always talk about getting rid of the bottom 5 to 10% of the people every single year. And that way they only have all-star players. So if you think about that, if a company like Cisco gets rid of 8,000 people and the next day does a hiring spree, what they're doing is they're getting rid of their weak and they're replacing with them good. Now, Mark Zuckerberg said it this year, and it made other people think, but it's what hiring managers have always been done. We're always asked to rank our employees, and we get rid of the worst, we keep the best. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that a person's not great if they're laid off. I want to make that very clear. Let's say I have a person that's in the wrong job. They could be the smartest person in the world, but they're supposed to be an architect and they're an engineering job. They're not going to be good at it, and they won't do well in that job. But if I move them to an architecture job, they're going to thrive because that's their skill. Or I might have someone in sales that's not a good sales rep, but they're a great something else, and I can move them. So the key to knowing and being great and never worrying about the economy is have a great set of skills, have a great attitude, always be the best of the best, always build your brand, always treat people well, and always do what you say. And at the end of that day, you have such a strong brand that people trust you because you deliver, you're always going to be safe. So I don't think the market looked grim. I think the market actually looks better than I thought it would be. The layoffs of the engineers are happening slower than I expected, and I'm really happy about that. But we're getting architect jobs constantly. We're getting new digital transformation jobs constantly. But you know, if you run a company and you've got a new grad or someone that's just not very skilled that you've got to pay $50,000 a year to start, or you've got AI which costs you $10,000 a year, but it's better than the $50,000 a year person, which you deploy. You deploy the AI. Now that doesn't mean you don't need a $500,000 engineer or a bunch of them. The people that are the best of the best to figure out what the AI didn't do right and clean it up. But you no longer need the basic intro level people. So don't worry about it. Incredible amount of opportunities. And after being in a position to hire, being in a position to have to fire, determining who and what goes where, if your skills are great, you're going to be great. If you're liked, you're going to be great. If your attitude is great, you'll be great. If your decisions will be great, you should be good to go. Considering cloud DevOps engineers must make high-stakes strategic decisions, complex problems, collaborate across teams, why do I assert that AI will place these roles in the futures? So, John, it depends on the engineer. So I will tell you that when you run a team, here's what your team's going to be. Let's say I've got a team of 20 people. 2 of those engineers know the technology so well, they can analyze trade-offs, they can make strategic decisions, and they know how to collaborate across teams. Those people go nowhere. In the world of AI, I keep these people and I give them $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 jobs because they become the best of the best. Now I've got my next 20% of the people. Those 20% of the people are almost at that level. I still keep them. I train them and I make them better. But now let's talk about the other people on the team that they don't know how to make a strategic decision. All they've done is learned by doing. So they know how to configure things, but they don't know what they're configuring. They don't know why they're configuring it. They're just clicking boxes. Those are the people that get laid off. So if I've got an engineer that's at the optimization, performance tuning level, figuring out the really complex stuff, I need them. But after interviewing thousands of people, what I've seen is it's very hard. And John, one of the things that was really troubling for me, many years ago, I worked in a strategic outsourcing environment where when I was at Cisco, we partnered with one of the world's largest technology integrators. And one of the things we would do is we would talk to people to try to find out what people did in their jobs to make sure they were vital. And I'd go around and ask people, what do you do? And I couldn't get an answer. I'm like, please tell me, what do you do? Okay, you're working in networking. Are you tuning the routing protocols? No. Okay. Are you turning up new solutions like an implementation engineer? No. Are you doing route planning, capacity planning? No. What are you doing? Oh, I do a lot of stuff. I go to a lot of meetings. And there's a lot of documents and a lot of emails. Okay, what are you doing? And in the end, we couldn't figure out what they were doing. 2/3 of the IT staff of most companies. To put it into context, now, well, I'm not going to say good or bad. Look at what happened at X. X went from non-profitable. Now its revenues are down, but its profitability is up. Cut 80% of their staff, and they're still running. And they don't have any technology problems whatsoever. I'm not going to make any political sides either way, but understand that a big global tech company cuts 80% of their staff and they have no problem. That's what I'm referring to. But the strong engineers, the Vinata, they're going to be fine. But it's the rest, it's the weak that we're always talking to. Are you better than the AI? So, John, I don't know how long you've been in tech, but have you interviewed people? And when you interview someone and you ask them a question about something, how many are as good as the AI? At least 50% are not. Then I ask you, when you interview a really good one, and they can tell you every little detail of how it works, that person is invaluable. I can't live without them. They are super important. So it's a shift in what you see training. The learn by doing people, there's no need for that anymore. But a deep planner and engineers, yeah, sure. These principal engineers, especially principal engineers with good communication skills that walk across departments, yeah, these are people are fine. I'm not referring those. I'm referring to the people that don't know how to do their job very well, that all they know is know how to build stuff, and that got 18 associate certifications in completely different careers, that know how to put something in there but don't know what it is. Sure, they know how to edit something in Linux, but they don't understand what the kernel is or how it's mapping things, and they don't understand the underlying choices of why you'd pick a virtual machine or what you need to look for. So those people are good. I hope, John, that Connolly makes sense. I hope I answered the questions in a manner that made sense, because we still need the strong. It's just the weak, not so much. I've had historia kolos na memilas maziso. And so, Angelo, I said it was nice to speak with John, because I know he's here and I saw that last name and I knew he and I could speak the same language, which I thought would be cool. So I hope that makes sense. Maybe we get the chance to meet one day on a webinar. I'd love to meet you. And I'm curious, where are you actually? And love to know that too, if you're in the US or if you're in Greece or in Australia or something like that. And what are my views on the Google Professional Cloud Architect compared to the AWS and Azure equivalent? Well, so years ago, I would have said no. Now, I'm going to tell you that if I had to pick any of the 3 exams other than market share, the Google Professional Cloud Architect is by far my favorite. It is very, and I have to wrap up after this question, but it is very strong. It actually gives you scenarios, and it's the only thing close that almost looks like a light architecture test. So it's less about the name of an AWS proprietary thing and how to configure it, like an AWS admin exam that they call architect. And it is more like a light architectural. They give you some case studies and you'll have to take those case studies. So I do like that. I will also tell you that the Google exam tests you actually, to some degree, on cloud knowledge, where the AWS exam by comparison tests you on AWS marketing names. And I've interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people and they didn't even know what a virtual machine was. I mean, it's terrible. Other than EC2 instance was even a virtual machine. I mean, it's scary. But you finish the Google exam, you'll have a better knowledge. Google's market share by comparison was weak, but it's growing. So I think that the Google Professional Cloud Architect is going to make sense. I've already filmed the content for our Cloud Architect Career Development Program. For the Google Professional Cloud Architect, we're going to add it. It's being edited right now. And it's now on the list that I can actually recommend. So amongst my one, because my philosophy is you're not going to learn architecture and a cloud certification, but I like one, Azure Solutions Architect Expert, AWS Solutions Architect Professional, Google Professional Cloud Architect. Pick your one. Architectural framework one, I like TOGAF, and I always like either a networking or a security one. And I really like the CISSP as that 3rd certification to try to make you look attractive to employers, and then it's skills to get you hired. I had so much fun with you, and I hope to meet so many more of you on our completely free architecture, how to become a cloud architect, enterprise architect, security architect, AI architect webinar on this Thursday at 1 p.m. It'll be live on Zoom. It'll be free on Zoom. And we'll do anything we possibly can to assist you in your career. I can assess you. I can check out your LinkedIn profile, give you feedback on it. Anything we can do on that, we will do. We'll talk about the role. We'll talk about the skills that you need. We'll talk about everything that you need to do, how to bypass HR if you want, if you're new and you don't have experience, and how to get hired. It's all free. And you can sign up. Chris from my team just chopped it in the chat box. Of course, the link will be in the description. There's also some free resources in that description, a list of skills for various architecture roles, how to win the interview. Come get it. It's free. And if you want to join our architectural training program, there's 60% off on all programs right now. And I highly encourage you to take advantage of it. But that means our training for most people in the US is less than the cost of 2 days pay for our average graduate. So I'm pretty excited about that. I just like to change lives. We run our programs at the lowest cost we possibly can and provide as much value as we possibly can. So If you want to see me there, I'd love to work with you too. But in any case, I hope you had a good time. If you had a good time, can you like the video? Maybe subscribe, hit the bell to be notified of new videos, and share this with a friend that you think could benefit from getting a little guidance on how to start their career. Because I want to do everything we can. Thank you for those that you were here.